Today on What Went Wrong, we nitpick the out of the nitpickers. Hi, I'm Brett Mauser, and I've made over 40 feature films. And while my films I'm very proud of, I have made some mistakes. But keeping track of all the little errors and inconsistencies is pretty tough to do when you're pretty much a one-man writer. And you're out there trying to just tell a film, tell a story. You're not going to concern yourself with those tiny little inconsistencies from day to day, and you can't pay somebody to be on set to watch to make sure that the glass is always exactly the same, the same height, or
continuity.
The continuity can be a real difficult thing to handle. And when I was growing up, they were fun. They were funny little gaffes, but they didn't destroy the movie for us. Now this is different from the continuities of the rules of the universe like we talked before.
Yeah.
These are the little nitpicks, the things that go on behind the scenes and wind up being on camera that are missed because we're not looking at our films with a microscope. And some people would say, well, you should be. Well, no, no, that's not the purpose of making a movie. I'm not making reality. I'm making a film, which is entertainment, which is just a story.
Right.
But there are a lot of websites or a lot of YouTube channels and even websites that will nitpick. I mean, there's even a website out there that gets all of the lavalier microphones and the mics. It's just dedicated to finding the hidden mics on people.
Wow. Someone doesn't have nearly enough to do.
No. And there's a website, the CinemaSins, which I used to really enjoy.
Yeah.
And they'd be 5 to maybe 10-minute videos that would have these little things. And after about a year of being subscribed to them and watching them, I just got to a point where they were like now 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes long. And they just focused on these tiny little inconsistencies that just made no sense. That you have to sit there and watch the movie from beginning to end in almost slow motion to catch these things. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
You do realize that these are movies and not reality, right?
Right.
The reason somebody's hair may not be exactly the same from shot to shot, especially in a Hollywood film, is maybe because they shot that scene 6 months after they shot the original one that they're putting the shots in with. But then there are people like Ryan George and his Screen Rant with the pitch meetings, which are fun and done in a fun light and is not slamming the film.
Right.
He does it in a funny comedic way.
Well, and also with him, you get to see. It does point out some of the things where I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but certain times when I've been watching movies, I'm like, wait, why is that happening? And he'll point it out in his stuff, and he's like, and because he's like the guy who's like, well, why is this happening? He's like, what do you mean? It's like, well, this and then this is like, I'm gonna need you to get completely off my bag about this, or he'll say, I don't know. It's fair enough. And so it's just a joking about how the producers and the guys making the movie in the studio will then have these different conversations. And you kind of wonder, maybe it happens like that, where they're gonna produce some movie that just has these glaring problems in it. But he introduces it in kind of fun. And of course, a glaring problem is a little bit different than a nitpicky. Yeah. This button wasn't buttoned, or this was a different whatever.
Here's a prime example of sort of what happens behind a movie set. We just had our camera batteries go down because. Here I am, just basically, especially in this setup, I'm one person. I've got the lights to worry about. I've got a recording deck. I've got 2 cameras running back and forth, and I've got since we're doing multiple ones, surprise, surprise, all at one time.
Right.
I'm swapping out cards. I'm loading the cards because I only have a certain number of cards, and we basically burn an entire card on one of these.
Right.
And we've got 2 cameras, so I'm downloading those, and at the same time, I'm also trying to keep up with the battery and making sure that the card is in there. And then when I put a used card in, I have to delete that card. And sometimes through these, I've forgotten to delete them. So I only have 10 minutes on the card. And then what just happened now was a battery. I forgot to swap out the batteries or before we started. So imagine taking that and now you're making a feature film, and you're pretty much doing it yourself. Especially recently. I mean, during the Innocent Saga, I had some producers, but they didn't go to film school, and that's nothing against them.
Right.
They just didn't have the collegiate education and the practical or the educational experience,
Knowledge based.
the knowledge based experience of knowledge based avenue of that position. So I was still the technical one. I still had to be the one that was checking all the tapes, making sure all that was going right. So a large majority of the technical side fell on me. So how does this fit into the nitpick? This is why it upsets me so much about a lot of the nitpicks. There was when you're shooting a film all by yourself, or with just a very very small crew, you're going to forget little things, and you can't take on those. You can't get every single thing right. And be keeping an eye on every single little part of the film. So, what is my option? People say, well, it'll save up the money, or if you got to do it right. Well, I'm never going to get my films made.
Yeah.
I have these stories that I want to tell, and I can't just sit on them and wait for a year and a half to 2 years until I can, even then, if I get the money to do that, I'm going to be embarking in a film, and it's going to take some time, and extra effort on my part just to get it done. And I'm still going to miss little things like, oh crap. I mean, there have been many a times where I've been in the middle of a shoot and the battery's flashing, and I'm like, oh crap, please, just get through this scene, get through this scene, because I forgot to swap out the batteries. Because there's so much you have to keep in mind. And
I remember watching Making of the Abyss one time. A great movie, 1989, James Cameron, and I remember they were doing this very, very scene when what her name is, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, when her character was
drowning.
She drowned. Yeah, and they're trying to get her back. And it's a very uncomfortable set. I mean, it's cold, it's wet. She's just been drugged through the water. She supposedly got water. She's coughing up water. Whatever. It's a very difficult scene, and the film ran out. I mean, we're talking about a major production, multi-million-dollar production, filming wherever the hell they were filming, in this massive, huge set of the Benthic Explorer, the thing they were in. And that happens. It happens. It's even on a set with people whose job it is to do that stuff and watch that stuff and monitor stuff. It still happens. Yeah. So of course it's going to happen when there's the crew is 2 or 3 people or 1 people. 1 people's the worst people to have doing everything. It's just 1 people doing it.
Yeah, and that's where nitpicks are going to come from.
Yeah,
and that attitude of expecting the perfect film, which doesn't exist. You're going to have little nuances. Yeah, and then there are other little areas that is going to be very subjective. There was one film that I did called The Benders.
I remember.
And there's a scene where the wife comes home and she winds up finding her husband in bed with another woman. Mm-hmm. But she comes home and she hears the thud upstairs. And she does the grabbing the knife and going upstairs to check it out. Well, at the after party, one of the actor's friends was talking, and they started in on the nitpicking. And I actually for a short time, I don't want to say felt embarrassed, but I felt, I was like, oh crap, man. Because he said, and of course it had to go, heard the noise, pulled the knife out, and went to investigate instead of just calling the cops. And for the first, before, I was probably a little intoxicated at the time. It was an after party after all. But I was a little upset and didn't really, overthink it myself. But I was like, oh man, they're right. And then I started thinking about it. And on the way home, I got pissed because I started thinking about it, and I was like, wait a minute. You hear a thud, and you're going to call the cops? I wouldn't do that.
No.
I needed a little bit more,
A little bit more than
a little more info before I start calling the cops
Find
just
out
because I hear a little thud.
Yeah, found out something rolled off the table, and there you are with the cops in your house.
Yeah, and the cops are sitting there going, "Oh, it's just a plant that fell off the deck."
Right.
You'd feel like an idiot then. So then I started going, "Wow!" And that's where I think I really started turning the corner on the whole nitpick thing,
Right.
and started going, "Wait a minute here. This is just people that are trying to show themselves off in a light. It
Right.
is now becoming an ego thing.
Trying to be a smart one.
They're showing off their big ass brain. Oh, look what I saw. Look what I caught.
Oh my God, the big ass brain people. I deal with them. Oh, I used to do. I don't really deal with them much anymore. But when I was my other job, I dealt with the big brain people who were going to tell me how to do. Oh yeah, those people. Yeah,
Yeah.
not interested.
So yeah. So when you're making your film, make the film. Try to keep up on what you can, but don't let them tear you apart because because they saw the boom guy in the background, way in the background, and it's the perfect shot except for that. And
Right.
that's the one you go with.
Right.
It's going to happen. I mean, there's great little things, and I don't think they take it away. I find them funny. I enjoy them. Things like in one of the James Bond movies, there's a guy in the background with a push broom, and he's not actually brooming anything. He's actually just like 6 inches off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And from a film perspective, I'm like, okay, they probably told the guy not to do that because a push broom makes a lot of noise.
Right.
So that he's probably mic'd, and it's picking up the audio. So they tell him, hey, just don't. So he's doing that. So, and I never noticed it the first 3 or 4 times.
Right.
And then, things like that, you either get told or you notice it yourself. And it's funny. It's like, but I don't watch, I don't, it does not ruin that movie for me.
Right. Well, and there's that, but then you also have to watch out for the egregious things that you should know better. Once again, talking about one of our favorite characters, Mary Sue Ray, in one of the Star Wars is when she has that big fight, her and boyfriend Ren,
yes.
With the red guys, and quite obviously Mary Sue has missed her point. Because she's supposed to apparently turn around because here comes a guy and he's got a big old wind up and a pitch kind of going on. And if he continues on his trajectory, he was going to clock her square in the head because she missed her mark. She just totally missed it. And instead, he goes high over it. Well, here's the problem with that. It's one thing to notice a little thing. A guy in the background doing that. When you have a fight scene, a featured fight scene, and your main character and it wasn't like the dude was off to the side. It was the one right in front of the audience as the audience is looking at it. He was right there. He was the one you were looking basically over his shoulder as he went in for this thing, and instead of striking a midships like he should have, he went over her head to miss her so the shot could continue. Now, here's the thing. That's the shot they went with. What? So, yeah, nitpicky stuff is one thing. But egregious stuff that you should have known better, you need to fix that.
Yeah.
Because that's not nitpicking. You screwed up.
Yeah.
There's a difference.
Yeah. Now, from an independent film standpoint, where you have no money and you have,
Totally different.
You've got to. There'll be going to be those times where you have to make that call, and you're like, well, crap, I can't. I don't have the time. The sun's going down, blah blah blah, and I can't be back.
But
there.
if you're paying
But
$200
if you've
million,
got millions of dollars on a movie, a Star Wars movie, which means you've got empty pockets, or you've got bottomless pockets.
if you bought that company for $4.5 billion, you should have enough money to do that take again.
And you have to ask yourself, did they not do any other takes? What? For the highlight scene of the film, and I had one of my students, and there's most of the time, I will talk to my students about having your opinion, and a lot of things are subjective. But she said, "Oh, that was just a great fight scene," and it did strike a personal nerve with me. As someone who loves choreographing scenes and loves action.
Did you have to point it out to her?
To see, I pointed it out, but it didn't make any difference. So it was a case of, look, I know you're not an action star or an action fan or what have you, but you have to have the appreciation of that art form.
Yeah.
And it's not just a bunch of people in a cool costumes twirling around like idiots. This is supposed to be choreographed and well planned out and well executed, because nothing at all against those stuntmen who were in there.
Yeah.
They did their jobs.
Yeah.
And they were so good that they were able to be mid-attack, see that she missed the mark, and be able to with split-second reflexes pull that.
Yeah, I mean, he was about to come in, and he just swung it up. And conversely, Star Wars Episode 1, the fight scene between Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Darth Maul. Are you kidding me? The double bladed thing. And then, of course, one of the greatest lightsaber fights I have ever seen. Even just greatest sword fights I've ever seen. I mean, right there with Princess Bride was Episode 3 between Obi-Wan and Anakin. The way they were at each other, and the speed and the ferocity and the force that they put into something. No pun intended. To then go from that and supposedly using the same production values to go from these fantastic, flying, screaming, intense battles, like the most intense battles I've ever seen, to then come up and see that. It's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? This is your precedent. I mean, I know Mary Sue's not as good of a sword fighter as Qui-Gon and Anakin Skywalker, and I realize she's just a girl, because this is what's going to happen. This is how it's going to come out. She's not as good as those guys. She's supposed to be, but she's not. And if you think it doesn't cause people to look at your movie a certain way, here it is. We're doing it. We're looking at your movie a certain way. I didn't particularly care for the episodes 1, 2, and 3 of Star Wars. Not at all. But I recognize those lightsaber fights, amazing. If you're going to have that as a part of your canon, okay, and that was in 2004, 2005 when that came out, and then I guess episode 3, I guess of 2004. I was in flight school.
Yeah, because I was thinking I was in Corpus at that time.
I was in flight school. So anyway, if you're going to have that as your precedent, and then in 2018, I guess it was, or 19, you're going to present or it was 2015, whatever the second one was. I guess it was 18, I guess, because 16 was when the first one came out. Anyway, the point is, if you're going to have your precedent as Star Wars 3, whatever that one was called, with Anakin and Obi-Wan, and then you're going to show Mary Sue and what's his name, Kylo, fighting the Knights of Red, whoever they were, and you're going to have this egregious stupidity, we're going to notice. It doesn't look good for you, So it's one thing to have little nitpicky things, the glasses not right, or maybe he had a wristwatch turned a different direction, or his ring was missing.
Or he had a wristwatch on.
Or he had a wristwatch, and then the next scene.
And a scene in Troy,
He did, having Troy, or like a Starbucks cup in Game of Thrones. Okay, that's egregious. But little things like that, no one cares about. But if you're not going to check and see that what you're doing and your filming is correct, well, that is on you.
So the answer to this is yes, there are nitpickers. Some of them are justified, some of them are not.
Some of them are not.
Don't let it get you down. Just like and that's the point of this series, and the point of making independent films and doing films with no money is to learn about the mistakes that you make so that you don't make them again. Don't let it get you down when you make those kind of mistakes. It's a learning process.
But learn from it. And learn that you do have to do your best. Yeah. If you're doing your best, you're doing it because you love it, we'll see that. But if you're also just like haphazardly putting it out there, we're going to see that too.